I'm Ben Goloff. I'm a climate campaigner at the Center for Biological Diversity Action Fund, and we seek to protect people and wildlife that are threatened by corporations and special interests. And we do that by strengthening our core environmental laws and supporting lawmakers from all political parties that stand for a healthy environment for all. And of course, by holding accountable those elected officials who do not. And in our climate program, we use law, we use science, we use media, and we use organizing to protect people and wildlife from the root cause of the climate crisis, which is continued fossil fuel extraction.
Excellent, thanks for that. And obviously we are in unprecedented times at the moment where the global outbreak of COVID-19 seems to have changed everything about doing stuff. Yeah. So one of the big focus point is obviously how to, once the kind of lockdown is starting getting eased, how should the economy recover from that? In Europe and other places, there's been a term kind of thrown out, like talking about a green recovery. But in the US government, they have been quite keen to bail out the fossil fuel industry, and particularly oil, gas, and fracking and coal companies.
Right.
As I understand it, there's not any kind of concrete package being signed, but it's clear that the Trump administration would want to go for something that really protect the oil industry, the extraction industries. So I assume that from your point of view, that's not a very great idea.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a moral outrage for fossil fuel executives to be cashing in while workers and communities are suffering through the pandemic. And we know that the same people that are overburdened by fossil fuel pollution, by the climate crisis, are also uniquely vulnerable and especially endangered by the COVID-19 pandemic. The fossil fuel industry has, been impacting communities for decades in terms of their health, and the industry's business as usual contributions have basically set up a disaster in terms of the unique vulnerability those communities are witnessing with the COVID-19 pandemic unfolding. So recent Harvard study has shown that exposure to even small increases in PM2.5 pollution is associated with a 15% greater chance of dying from COVID-19. And in the US, and looking at where fossil fuel infrastructure is located and polluting facilities are located, we know that Black and brown people are disproportionately impacted by those facilities, are experiencing worse air quality, and are also dying at disproportionate rates from the pandemic. So just from the health and justice implications, it's an outrage to consider bailing out that industry right now. And then equally, the fossil fuel bailout would threaten to lock in and exacerbate the global climate emergency. And we know that, like a household budget, our fossil fuel budget is already overspent, that there are enough fossil fuels and existing producing reserves in mines globally to blow way past 1.5 degrees Celsius as necessary based on science. So as demand for oil and gas production is nosediving, we really need to be seizing on this opportunity to support workers and communities, yes. And that doesn't mean propping up a dying industry. It means responsibly winding down fossil fuel production and existing infrastructure in a way where we can really plan for protecting those workers in that industry and economy-wide at every step of the way.
Yeah, it's quite extraordinary, isn't it? Because oil demand has fallen drastically, and you saw a brief point the oil price dipping down to around zero. And as I understand it, the industry is running out of places to kind of store excess oil. And at the same time, there's been a slow decline in drilling activities, but there's not really any. Industry still drills like there's no tomorrow. And at the same time, the industry haven't been held back and can't been quite quick to, over the years, just huge donations of paying off politicians stuff. And now they're starting they want some money because no one wants to buy the oil.
That's exactly right. I was going to make that point is that, remember that the industry has been working for decades to deceive the public on the dirty impacts of their product. And, that's the impacts both on the communities that live next to fossil fuel pollution, the immediate health impacts, and of course, the contribution to climate change. And they've been patting the halls of power. They've been waiting for this moment. They've been building up for this moment, getting their lobbyists into places where they have virtually unlimited resources and unlimited access to get what they need and to capitalize on moments of crisis, on moments of shock, like what we're seeing right now. And so they're paying dividends that, the whole conversation around about fossil fuel bailout is deeply related to that decades and decades long campaign by the industry, by executives in that industry to position themselves to make profit, even in moments of disaster like this.
Yeah, so in your terms, your point of view and your organization's point of view, what would a CARF COVID-19 recovery package look like? What should the focus be laid upon?
Yeah, so in the short term, we need people first relief legislation, period. That means guaranteeing direct protections for workers and impacted communities and not for corporate executives, especially not in polluting industries. In the longer term, we need a package of recovery legislation that's really big and bold and transformative, that reshapes the extractive economy into one that's regenerative and sustainable and just. And that needs to include a just transition off fossil fuel production nationwide. It needs to set the stage for that process unfolding over the decade to come. So, in terms of immediate relief, we stand with workers and with labor unions that are calling for ensuring that essential workers are protected first and foremost. So that means, personal protective equipment. It means guaranteeing full wage replacement to all workers that have lost their jobs, instituting nationwide moratorium on utility shutoffs, on evictions, on loss of homes. And it means explicitly addressing the disproportionate impact of the crisis on Black communities, Indigenous communities, and communities of color. We did see some good things come out of the $3 trillion HEROES Act that passed the House last week, and again faces long odds in the Senate. It does include some important steps towards protecting essential workers, as well as a critical provision against utility shutoffs. But it doesn't include what we need in terms of the safeguards against the fossil fuel bailout. And we can't protect workers with partial measures without also ensuring that we're preventing a fossil fuel bailout that would lock in climate catastrophe and ultimately devastate communities and workers across the industry.
Yeah, so in terms, if there were to be like this big bonanza fossil fuel bailout, what would you guys, is it something you guys would actually go in and fight?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Sorry, if this big fossil fuel industry bailout were to come to fruition,
sure.
What would your approach as an organization be in that?
Absolutely. So, there is a reality of a fossil fuel bailout already. So, while HEROES itself, the new act that's being considered, doesn't explicitly pull in a new giant fossil fuel bailout effort, the existing relief legislation that was passed, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, or CARES Act, includes this over $400 billion slush fund, basically nearly condition-free loans that are open to large corporations. And within minutes of signing, of being passed, Trump issued an executive statement basically gutting most oversight of the Secretary of the Treasury, Mnuchin, in terms of how those funds are allocated. We're already seeing how fossil fuel companies are benefiting disproportionately because, essentially Secretary Mnuchin has unfettered access to approved loans, and the Trump administration has been very clear that they'd like to see the fossil fuel industry get supported through this situation. And we know that the Federal Reserve has a bond buyback scheme that is expected to be a windfall for fossil fuel companies as well. So this is underway. You're right. We haven't seen massive new fossil fuel bailout formations come through, but we have already something that's very concerning in existing law. Going back to your question, what would we like to see? So apologies for the offshoot, but I want to make clear that we actually are already seeing a fossil fuel bailout,
Yep.
right? That this is undergoing. So what we need to see, I mean, one of the things we have won is we've made it politically toxic to fill up, quote unquote, fill up the strategic petroleum reserve with massive amounts of taxpayer money for oil purchase. That's something that has been advocated. So we absolutely need to hold the line on that. But we also need to ensure that there is accountability and oversight for that fund that's already in play. And that needs to be coming explicitly from Congress, as well as ideally from the administration.
Excellent. So 2020 is obviously a crucial year for on so many points. First of all, it was obviously be the year of climate action, but
yeah.
COP26 has been postponed into a yet unknown date. But it's also the year of the U.S. presidential election, and we now know it's a two-horse race between Donald Trump and Joe Biden.
Right.
Joe Biden has got some slack from many climate activists that he is not doing enough, and he haven't been strengthening his core message on climate enough. Do you think that a fossil fuel bailout would change under like a Biden presidency?
Thanks for the question. So we urgently do need Vice President Biden to make a public commitment to undo the damage that is already going on through the fossil fuel bailout, and that we expect the Trump administration to oversee over the next 9 months by bailing out the fossil fuel industry. And again, bailing them out from their past pre-coronavirus mistakes. So we need Biden to make a commitment now. And if he does end up in the White House on January 2021, Biden will be faced with a challenge of, on the one hand, advancing priorities to address the climate emergency while also addressing months and months of aid for this industry that's driving that crisis. And so we need him to come out now with a oversight and transparency plan that makes clear what he will do to undo any of the impacts of a fossil fuel bailout over the coming months. So that's what we need to see him to do. I'm hopeful that he will do so, and we will be asking him to do so. But we also, of course, need him to do so much more. It was heartening to see today that Biden made a commitment that he would deny permitting for the essentially zombie Keystone XL project, pipeline project that keeps coming back.
It's the name of the story, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And never ending, but I mean, it's heartening to see that he does intend to deny those permits. And he has made previous commitments to end new fossil fuel leasing on public lands and hold polluters accountable. So those are good signs, but you're right, we need him to do more, and we need him to make those commitments now. We need him to commit to declare a climate emergency. We need him to commit to ban fracking and begin the process of phasing out fossil fuel production again, so we don't end up in a situation where the bottom is falling out based on inevitable declines of this industry. We need it to happen fast on the timeline of science, and we need it to happen in a way that's just and equitable and protects workers. We also need him to commit to reinstate the crude oil export ban and to direct EPA to use the full powers of the Clean Air Act to wind down greenhouse gas emissions. And we do need him to commit to lead a 10-year mobilization to achieve 100% zero emissions, clean and democratically controlled electricity, among many other things. So yes, we need him to take action now in terms of laying out his plans on all of these fronts, including how he will to roll back any fossil fuel bailout that goes forward over the coming months.
I guess he doesn't have a short list. I'm sure that many people who are presenting him with the various wish list of what he should do. I guess
That's right.
if you were to look back at the end of Obama administration tenure and before Trump came in, some might have argued that it was good first steps by Obama, but much more were needed. And obviously Obama Trump has rolled a lot of these things back. So obviously,
right.
I guess the first priority would be to obviously give EPA the rights they had under the Obama administration, and so on, and tons of other things. But would you say that obviously, regardless how strong Biden goes in or not, clearly he is still the better choice than Trump?
Absolutely. I mean, we need Biden to be a champion on climate because Trump has been such an anti-champion. Trump has done everything he can to roll back bedrock environmental laws, and we need Vice President Biden to really take charge and offer the alternative. That alternative is about defense, but it also is about the protection of all life on Earth as we know it, and that demands transformative action. Defense in the age of 2020 and in the age of the climate crisis that we're facing, defense is taking bold action, laying out using every tool in his kit through executive action and working with Congress to address the climate emergency. And so he should be taking that action from day one. And we need a president that will do that, and we're hopeful that that will be Biden.
Are you hopeful?
We are hopeful. We are also we're not going anywhere. So we're going to be organizing between now and January 2021 to make sure that the conditions are right, that Biden will have the backing of everyone that has been working for decades to ensure that we address the climate crisis. We need to hear from him, right? So my hope will increase as we hear commitments from Biden. And so we need him on record now laying out his plan. And he simply hasn't done that yet. He's made a few commitments that are promising, but we need to hear him actually spell out his commitments for executive action and how he'll work with Congress to prevent climate catastrophe.
I guess what's at stake is more than just the office of president. So you have like Senate seats and congressional seats, local governors and district attorneys, and so there's a lot of stake, isn't it? So I guess the other priority is to elect as many climate-friendly politicians across the country.
Absolutely. But I think it's given short shrift the amount that the president can do from day one using executive action. And we can't be in a situation where we're depending on a friendly Senate and House. We actually, I mean, of course, do we want that? Do we need that? Yes. But short of that, the president can take meaningful action on day one. And all the priorities that I listed a moment ago in terms of declaring a national emergency, in terms of starting the process to get off fossil fuel production nationwide, to use the full power of the Clean Air Act. The existing law that we have, the existing environmental laws, are not being used as they need to be to actually address the climate crisis. And so we need the president to take action within their first 10 days to actually begin that process. And yes, of course, they should be working with Congress immediately and over time to follow through on the full sweeping transformative climate action that we need. But there's a whole lot that the president can do and should be committing to do from day one.
Yeah, good point. So just turn back briefly to this current ongoing crisis and what the energy industry is facing. Do you think that this signal the beginning of the end of the oil industry? In terms, some experts have predicted that we could actually have reached peak oil demand now.
Well, I mean, we know that the oil, gas, and coal industry has already been in a long-term inevitable decline. And that's due to financial mismanagement prior to the pandemic. And it's due to the rise of cleaner and cheaper renewable energy alternatives. So we need to be accelerating the wind down of fossil fuel production, and we need to be doing so in a way that's managed and just and equitable, protecting workers and communities at every step of the way. And so in some ways, what we're seeing now is a shock, a foreshadowing of what it could look like if we don't have a managed and equitable wind down, if we don't have the federal government stepping in and saying that we're going to do what we are, do our jobs to protect workers, to protect everyday people across the United States in communities that are economically dependent on fossil fuel extraction and the rest of us to actually have a just transition to an energy system that works for all of us. We need action right now from our leaders, not only to avert climate and economic devastation from the climate crisis, from and intersecting with the coronavirus pandemic, but we also need the government to be taking action to lead on a just transition to clean and renewable energy that takes this as a warning sign, right? That we would actually be here inevitably anyway.
Good point. As many other crises, the COVID-19 outbreak has also prompted a lot of conspiracy theories, as we have seen with the climate debate and stuff. But nevertheless, a lot of people have shared support for scientific kind of information online. Do you think also that this virus somehow have given science a boost to saying actually highlighting science up to the level where they should be at? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I think so. I mean, I am hopeful. I mean, the thing about the pandemic, which is true with the climate crisis as well, but the pandemic brings into excruciating focus that if you ignore science, people die. If you ignore science, people die, and people die in an unjust and inequitable way. That those communities that have been systemically disinvested in, communities of color, indigenous communities, and low-income communities who are exposed to the worst aspects of an economy driven by extractive industries, driven by fossil fuels that are polluting in catastrophic ways. People die in ways that cannot be undone by political rhetoric. And so at the end of the day, the veil is pulled off. And I think that is happening now. And I hope that there will be, that the connections are drawn, not only that science matters, but also that science matters in a way where the effects aren't even, right? And that there is there is a reason that fossil fuel executives and wealthy people have fought the climate action we need for so long, have fought efforts to roll back fossil fuel pollution. It's that they feel like they're invincible. And with the COVID pandemic, everybody is at risk, and yet that's not in an even way. And the same is true with the climate crisis. All of us are already feeling the devastating impacts of fossil fuel economy and the climate crisis, and it's not even. That Black and Brown indigenous communities in the Global South are disproportionately impacted.
Ben, this has been a fascinating talk. If people want to follow you guys and what you're up to, how can they get in touch and how can they support your campaign?
Thank you so much. Yeah, so I mean, this is a long unfolding process, as we all know. You can reach us at centeractionfund.org and follow our work at the Center for Biological Diversity Action Fund. We're working in coalition with hundreds of groups nationwide, pushing back against the fossil fuel bailout. And you can certainly follow us on social media at CBD Action Fund to find out what we're doing to make sure that we're supporting lawmakers that protect an environment that works for all of us.